Okay, so we want to look at some file processing from chapter 6. We're going to be using scanner objects to process files or input from those files. And then in that situation, we're going to be processing the data in some way. So whether it's by line or by strings or some different format of numbers, a lot of the tricky stuff comes in how the data file itself is organized. And then we'll look at how do you create a new file or output. And a lot of this work is syntax dependent. So, we don't use it very much in our course. And then in the next course, you'll use it a little bit, but not, you use file processing a little bit, but we don't do a ton of it. And because, we're concerned with the logic, and the logic would be in that middle section, the processing of the data. But the syntax of how do you open a file and how do you read from the file, that is pretty much language dependent, right? So we're learning it in Java in order to understand how we could process the data, really. So keep that in mind as we go through that, the syntax, like if you don't process files for a while, then you forget the syntax. So then you just go back and you look it up, and we figure out how to open a new file. So the first thing we need to do is I'll go into Eclipse, and I'll start a new Java project called Chapter 6. I don't have any modules there. Notice I have a Java project called Password. That's to the Verify Password project. It's getting its own folder. So then in the Chapter 6, you'll notice we have the source code folder. Say that 10 times fast. What I want to do is I want to put the data files that I want to read into this Chapter 6 folder at the same level as they are as the source code. So if you go to Canvas, we have a set of data files in the Chapter 6 materials. Sample data files, and I've just downloaded these files. I don't know if we're going to use them all. We're going to use some of them. So just download them all, and then I'm going to put them all in that Chapter 6 folder in my Eclipse. So we're just going to find them in our downloads. Which I've got here, my downloads, and then I can just drag them over into Eclipse, into that folder. So let's close these guys. So we can see what we're doing here. Go back to my downloads. Here they are, Math Faculty. Just drag it over into Chapter 6. Do you want to copy it? Yes, there it is. And I want it to be at that level, the same level as that source code folder. And I'll just grab them all. I could do them all at once, but I'll do them individually. I'll grab two of them here at the same time. Numbers and Harry Potter. In case you need some summer reading. You can read Harry Potter. All right. So now they're all in here. And notice that they're at the same level as my source code folder. So if I don't have that, I'm going to get an error. There is a way around it, and that is to tell the compiler where that data is. You can do that through listing the file path. And I was looking for whether I had the PowerPoint open, but I don't. But she goes over that in the PowerPoint. So you can look at that. The easiest way for us is just to put it in the folder, the same folder that we're going to be doing our source code in, and at the same level as that source code folder. Okay, so now we'll go in here and we'll do a new class called, let's call it, let me go back to Notebook for a second, see what I'm doing. So we're going to start with this first one, which is, we're going to use the Math Faculty text file. And let's just look at that briefly. So we're going to reformat Math Faculty. So let's call it Math Faculty processing, data processing. It's an awfully long name, but whatever. That's kind of what we're doing. Okay. So I'm just gonna start up here and I'm gonna say my name. Program to practice opening with a data file, file objects, and data manipulation. And again, because opening and reading the file itself is not really the work. The work is what you're doing with the data in the file. So yes, we need to learn the syntax, but the truth is, once we learn that syntax, that becomes easier, and then if we forget it in the future, we just look it back up. So we need the java.input/output, or IO, and we'll just take everything from that. And then I'm going to use a scanner. So I have a typo there, Java. I'm going to also import the utilities for the scanner. And I'm just going to open up the PowerPoint for a second. So when the file compiles, when we compile this math faculty data processing, it doesn't know whether the data file is there or not. And so the file won't compile because it's going to not know whether or not it's going to be able to find that file. So what we do is we tell it that's okay. And the way we tell it that's okay is we throw an exception. So we tell the compiler that the code is going to throw an exception. So that comes into main, and any method that's going to use that file throws file not found exception. That's exactly what we want to type. We're going to jump in there right after this parameters. We're going to say throws capitalized, all capitalized words. So the exceptions are always start with a capitalized word, just like classes. File not found exception. So that's going to be not only in main when we want to read a file, but also in any other method that's going to read that file. So we'll see how we need that if we're going to open a file from a method. Okay, so then what does this file look like? So sometimes it's helpful to look at the data that you're going to deal with. So I am going to do that by going to I already put them all in my Eclipse, and so I can go to my workspace folder, which I call Java Summer 20, and I'm going to open this math faculty text file. So notice in here it doesn't say .text after it, but the extension is .txt. It's just that I'm not showing it here. So if you look here and you go to like properties, there it is, .txt. So the name of this is actually mathfaculty.txt. Okay, and we're gonna open that up, and we'll see what it is. It's got what number are you? So there's numbers 1 through 12 for the faculty, and then their first name followed by their last name, followed by each of the courses they're teaching in the fall. So myself, I'd be the 10th person alphabetically by last name. First name is John, last name is Tutangi, and I'm teaching only one math class in the fall, Math 146. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is print the list of the names in the form last name, comma, first name. So by looking at the data file contains a list of math faculty in the form first name space last name, and then followed by their fall courses. Actually, they have a number in front. A number followed by their first name, their last name, and the fall courses. Okay, so if you look at the data itself first, it's helpful. We know that the first name is always the second thing, the second token, and the last name is the third token per line. So that's going to help us when we go to process the data. But we also notice that the lines are not the same. They don't all have the same number of elements. So like this has 4 classes. 2 of them are what we would call integers, and 2 of them are not integers. He has 3 classes. Here's a person with 4 classes. They're all integers. I only have the 1 class. Here's one with 2. We also notice the next number after those 2 integers, again, is another integer. So if we're looking for integers, it might be tricky to know whether or not we're at the end of the course list, or have we moved on to the next line. The other thing to think about is that not all the courses are integers, because these have an E at the end, which we're actually getting, we're using a new system starting in the winter, and they're telling me we can no longer have an E at the end. So I'll have to work on that. But regardless, we're going to deal with it from this data file. First off, we don't need to worry about the classes at all. We just need to print the last name, then the first name. So in our pseudocode, we might think about sort of let's just grab a couple names. So it was number 1. Oops. I might write what the data looks like. It was a 1. There's no dot. I used to have a dot there, but I took it away because that would be a double. It was Ryan Dorman, I think. And then there were some classes. And then number 2, I think, was Rick Downs. Again, some classes. So first off, let's just try to open the file, and then we'll talk about how we can process this data. So to open the file, we're going to make a new object file. So file, we'll just give it input. We'll call it input file equals new file. And then here I put the name of the file, as long as it's in the same folder. So here I can put math faculty. There was no space, so I don't need a space here. .txt. And notice the .txt is not part of it, but we can see that's the symbol for the text files. And then we might want to just run this to see if it crashes, okay? Because if it can't find it or if something's wrong, it's going to tell us it can't find it. Okay, so then what I want to do is I want to use a scanner to read from that file. So we're going to create a scanner, and let's call it input equals, I'm gonna sneeze. Okay, sorry, I didn't quite sneeze there, but I almost did. Scanner input, where am I? Scanner input equals new scanner. So right here, instead of saying system.in, we're gonna read from this input file. You know, there's a way to do this all in one bit of code, and she covers that in the PowerPoint. Let's see if I still have it open here. Here it's all done in one bit of code, where you do a new scanner, and inside the scanner you do new file with the file name. So because I don't actually need to use the file except as part of this scanner, so this is fine, but it's easy to sort of miss that part of the code, or the fact that you need a new file in there. So you know, I'll do a combination of both, but initially I'll set it up first, open the file, create the file, and then create the scanner. Okay, and then we recognize we could do it all at once. So in here, what we would do is this code on the right would go in place of the input file here. Makes sense. Okay, so let's just make sure we can print something out. We'll do system output.println input.next line. So that should print the first line of input. There it is. Okay, so suppose I wanted to print all the lines of input. So let's go ahead and make that part of this assignment. I'm going to put a comment here and tell myself print each line of input. So we would want to use a while loop, and maybe I'll go back to my logic over here. What would that logic look like? It's not connected to the names here yet because we're not quite doing that yet. But I'd want to say, you know, while there's more lines, then I'd want to print each line. And then read the next line. Maybe not read it here. I'm not quite sure where that read's going to go. But essentially, I'm trying to erase that. Oh, I need to use my pen. Sorry. Essentially, while there have more lines, print the next line, read, and let's put read and print. Read, then print the next line. Okay. So how do we know if it has another line? Well, so we're going to use the scanner look ahead again. So input dot has next line. While there's another line, what do we want to do? Well, we want to print that line. So system.output control space print input dot next line. And then I don't need this line anymore. I could have just copied that in there. I'm going to tighten this up so you can see that's creating the creating the new file and then creating a scanner that's going to read from it. And then now we're going to print each line of that data out. And that helps us see what the data looks like as well. It also checks that we know that it's working. So now we need to print names in the format last name first name. So that scanner is now at the end of the file. And so I might need to say again that input equals scanner. Let's read it again here. Let's copy that. Actually, I think I need a new scanner. Yeah, I need a new scanner here. So I need to say, you know, scanner input 2 equals new scanner mathfaculty.text. So the scanners, once you're at the end, you know, you can't go backwards. You can't ever get back. The scanner starts and it goes through and it gets to the end and then it's done. So I'm curious if we can't redefine it, which is what I was trying to do, but it wasn't letting me. So it does let me use the same variable name without a new declaration, but it still wants me to define it as a new scanner. So I could still use the word input, but then it's input still equals new scanner. I think it makes more sense just to use a second input 2 equals new scanner. Okay, so now I'll go back to my logic here. So we still need this while there's more lines, right? But now we're no longer going to be reading and printing. So the nice thing about each line is that we can ignore the integer. That's going to be the first name. And that guy's going to be the last name. So I can create variables, maybe temporary variables, you know, temp first, temp last, or we could just call them first name and last name. And as we loop through, while there's more lines, let's see, I got to get rid of that integer. So that's going to be input.next. You could say next integer, or you could just say input.next. That'll clear out the first thing. And then you got your first name, which is going to equal input.next. Then you got your last name, which again is going to equal input.next. Notice you're never going to get here if there's not another line of code. So this only runs while there are still more lines of code. So we're not going to be looking, we're not going to be taking the next thing when there is nothing there. And then, so then we're done, because then I could have a variable full name if I wanted. It might be a little more complete. It's going to be last plus a comma and a space, and then plus first. And then we can print full name. So this logic, is really the safest bet is to do this on paper, because especially if your data is complicated, notice how I started this. I'm going to leave that. I started it by writing out sort of what the data looks like, because you need that. You might also want to, somewhere down here, think about or write down what you'd want that sample data to do after. Downs, Rick, I'm putting these in the wrong order. That's okay. Dorman, Ryan, dot, dot, dot. So like, I'm writing down what the data looks like in the beginning. I'm writing down what the data looks like at the end. And then in between, how do we get from there to there? It's this while loop, and then we skip the integer, read the first name, read the last name, create the full name, and then print the full name. Now, again, I could avoid this creating of the full name step if I wanted to by just printing what I needed to in this print statement. Doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to collapse that down, come back over here. So now, again, we have a while loop. You can see these while loops are actually, you don't always need a while loop, but whenever you don't know how many times it's going to run, well, here it's going to run 12 times, but you can't assume that we're not going to hire another teacher for fall and add someone to this list. So you can't assume by just looking at the data that it's always going to be like that. What you can assume is that it's always in the same format, hopefully. Yeah. So while input2 dot has next line, input2 dot next, that just gets rid of that integer. If I wanted to save it, I would save it somewhere. String. Let's see, the first name is going to come first. So first name equals input2 dot next. String last name input2 dot next. We're going to run into trouble here because it's not going to quite work. And I'll show you why. But my logic's a little bit off, and we're going to go there and look at it and see why. As it reads through this, well, I'll show you. I'll just do it, and we'll see what happens. So then we're going to let our full name, string full name, be equal to last name plus comma space plus first name. And then we'll print that out. And I want you to, so, I didn't think about this while I was writing that pseudocode. I forgot to think about what else is in the data. Oh, we got an error for one thing, right? So I'm hitting an error at the end. Look what it did. It printed, oh, that's actually printing from here. So the error is happening, oh, it's happening down here. Somewhere we're getting an error in here. And it's not showing you why the error is happening like I wanted it to. It's just crashing right away. What I was worried about initially was I thought it was going to print Ryan Dorman as the Dorman comma Ryan, and then it wouldn't have advanced, so it would have thought, oh, I see, that would be the next, and then you'd have two names, and it would think these are names because why not? Because they're just strings really, and then it would have one more, and then it wouldn't know what to do because of this. So we didn't take into account for these classes. So what I have to do here is I have to readjust my thinking a little bit and read in the entire line first. So what I want to do is I want to create a string here called temp line, which is equal to input2 dot next line. And then just temporarily, let's just get rid of all of this, and let's just print that temp line out. This is a good way to sort of test and see if things are working. Oh, I don't want this input2.next. So this says, while input2 has another line, read it into this thing called temp line and then print it out. So this should print everything twice, basically. And it doesn't. Why not? Oh. Oh. I see what's wrong. This is great. I'm going to go back. I'm just backing up. Look at my scanner code up here. This is a perfect error to make because it's very common. She actually talks about it in the PowerPoint too. My scanner is actually supposed to read from the input file, which is a type file, mathfaculty.txt. I am reading from this string, mathfaculty.txt. So when it goes to read next, that's fine, but then there's nothing else to read after it. Now this, I'm going to get rid of this as well. So when it goes to read the next thing, it crashes because there's only one, this only has one token because it's reading, this is the scanner, it's reading from this string really. So we never read from this file. If I want to read from the file, I got to put input file there. Okay, so this is what I had originally. It's still not going to work, but it's not going to, it might crash, but not till later. Yeah, it still crashes. So I want to show you what it did. I recreated this thing. I read out the first thing, ignore it, assign a first name, assign a last name, and then print them with a comma between them. And let's see what it did. Well, it worked fine for Ryan, but then it listed his classes comma separated. And then we lost some people here. We got Rick, and then it read a number in. And then it, so it's first name, last name, and then it's going skip this, first name, last name, skip this, first name, last name. So at some point it should say Rick, comma 2, yep. And then it's skipping the next thing. So what's happening is I'm getting the first name and last name, and then I have to skip all that. I have to get out of that line. Okay. So what we're going to do instead is similar to what I just did, is I want to create a string that's a temporary line. Okay. And then I want to create another scanner. Let's just call it temp scan. And it's going to be a new scanner from that line. And in that line, I want to skip the first thing, which is the number, where are you in the place? So number 1, I want to skip. And then string first name is going to equal the temp scan dot next, and string last name is going to equal temp scan dot next. And you know, this is tricky stuff because we have a scanner reading from an input file which was defined as a file from a text string, right? So the first error I had was creating a scanner just for this text. But now I have a scanner for the input file, and then I'm going to read a line out of that. And then with that line of code, I'm going to create another scanner to read that line of code from. And then I'm going to skip the first word, take the next word as the first name, the next word is the last name, set up the full name, and then print it. So now when I run it, it worked. I feel like this video has kind of run its course. You know, what we could have done here, I almost feel like all of this should be in its own method. We could have a method called process line or something, and that might ease up the number of scanners that we're doing. I don't know if I needed to do that or not. I'm going to see what's left in this video. Modify the code to indicate the number of courses they have in the fall. I think I'm going to pause because I feel like this is a good place to stop and then restart in a few minutes with that other content. And maybe we compartmentalize main a bit more, get rid of this first bit, clean this up a little bit in another method.